Welcome to Conspiracy Files. I'm your host, Zoe Parker, and in today's episode, we're venturing to the coldest, most remote place on Earth, a land shrouded in ice, mystery, and strict international control. Antarctica, a continent of extremes, is home to one of the most persistent modern enigmas. Why is so much of it off limits to civilian travel? The skies above it tightly restricted, the land beneath largely untouched. Today, we examine the Antarctica no-fly zone and the growing questions surrounding what lies beneath the ice. The origins of Antarctica's peculiar status begin long before the first whispers of conspiracy. In the early 20th century, the continent was a blank space on the geopolitical map, a frozen wasteland with little strategic or economic value. But as technology advanced and world powers expanded their reach, interest in the region grew. Nations began launching expeditions not only for exploration, but also for staking claims. The British, Norwegians, Australians, and Germans were among those who sought territory, laying the groundwork for international friction. In 1959, amid Cold War tensions and rising competition for global dominance, 12 countries, many of them rivals, signed what would become one of the most unique treaties in history, the Antarctic Treaty. The agreement, which came into force in 1961, designated the entire continent as a scientific preserve, banned military activity, and froze territorial claims. It also prohibited nuclear testing and the disposal of radioactive waste. For a world divided by ideology and conflict, the treaty was a rare gesture of cooperation. But with that cooperation came secrecy. The treaty has since grown to include 56 signatories, yet it remains governed by an elite group known as the consultative parties, nations with a proven scientific presence on the continent. These countries effectively control what research is permitted, where stations can be built, and who is allowed access. This exclusivity has long raised eyebrows. Unlike other regions of the world, where commercial aviation, tourism, and exploration are relatively open, Antarctica remains tightly regulated. Only pre-approved flights, mostly operated by national governments or approved scientific groups, are allowed to enter deep interior airspace. Commercial airliners, for instance, are generally barred from flying directly over the continent. Most are routed far around the southern polar region, even if doing so would shorten their journey. The official explanation is rooted in safety. Harsh weather, magnetic anomalies, and a lack of emergency landing sites make overflights risky. In addition, the lack of radar coverage and communication infrastructure in certain regions of Antarctica means aircraft could become virtually invisible during transit. These logistical concerns are valid, but they don't fully explain the scale of restriction or why certain areas appear to be permanently off-limits. There are also curious historical precedents. During World War II, Germany launched an expedition to Antarctica in 1938, establishing a region known as Neuschwabenland. Officially, the mission was for whaling and scientific study, but some historians have speculated that the Nazis were scouting for more strategic purposes. Post-war, rumors circulated that German submarines had fled to secret Antarctic bases, which some believed housed advanced technology. These stories were given fuel when the U.S. military launched Operation High Jump in 1946-47, a massive naval deployment that included over 4,000 personnel, aircraft, and ships. The official goal was testing equipment in cold weather conditions, but the sheer scale of the mission and its sudden termination after just a few weeks left room for speculation. The combination of tightly controlled access, military history, and unexplained activity laid the foundation for theories to take root. Over time, the image of Antarctica shifted from an untouched expanse of ice to something more elusive, a locked vault hiding secrets beneath its surface. And in the decades that followed, questions only deepened. Why were even minor expeditions subject to layers of international scrutiny? Why did global rivals so readily agree to keep this one place peaceful while the rest of the planet remained in conflict? As modern satellite imaging improved and digital maps became commonplace, ordinary people noticed strange anomalies in the Antarctic landscape, structures, shadows, and blanked-out zones. Coupled with the persistence of the no-fly zones, these findings began to challenge the public's trust in the official narrative. Antarctica was no longer just a frozen continent. It was now the epicenter of a mystery that, to some, felt too carefully managed to be innocent. Among the most notable figures tied to the growing enigma of Antarctica is Admiral Richard E. Byrd, a decorated U.S. naval officer and polar explorer. Byrd led several expeditions to Antarctica beginning in the late 1920s, and his missions earned both public fascination and strategic military attention. He is often remembered for his involvement in Operation High Jump, but it was a later mission, Operation Deep Freeze, that solidified his legacy as a key player in Antarctica's shadowed history. Byrd's expeditions were officially described as scientific and exploratory. However, his interviews and reported statements, particularly those given after his final Antarctic journeys, sparked lasting intrigue. In one 1947 interview with the Chilean newspaper El Mercurio, Byrd allegedly warned that the United States must prepare to defend itself against enemy aircraft flying over the poles. This cryptic comment, though lacking full context, fueled decades of speculation that Byrd had encountered something beyond natural phenomena, perhaps evidence of unknown technology or civilizations hidden within the ice. While no official records confirm anything extraordinary during Byrd's missions, the atmosphere surrounding his expeditions has led many to believe that vital information was kept classified. The sudden end of Operation High Jump, which was scheduled to last 6 months but concluded after just 8 weeks, only deepened the mystery. Some conspiracy theorists suggest that Byrd's team encountered hostile forces, whether human, non-human, or artificial, forcing an abrupt withdrawal. Supporters of this view cite the operation's immense scale and logistical investment, questioning why the mission would end prematurely, if only facing logistical or weather challenges. Another name frequently associated with the Antarctic conspiracy narrative is Hermann Göring, the high-ranking Nazi official who spearheaded Germany's Third Reich-era polar explorations. The 1938-39 German Antarctic expedition has drawn heavy scrutiny over the years. The mission included the use of specially equipped aircraft to drop swastika-marked flags over areas of Antarctica, effectively claiming territory for the Reich. They named the region Neuschwabenland, and according to declassified Allied documents, the expedition was well-funded and well-prepared, equipped with scientists, geologists, and military personnel. After World War II, rumors surfaced suggesting that remnants of the Nazi regime had retreated to hidden Antarctic strongholds, allegedly supported by advanced technology. These claims were further amplified by post-war intelligence reports detailing the escape of key Nazi figures, including speculation about missing U-boats that had vanished without a trace. Although no conclusive evidence has surfaced to support the existence of Nazi bases beneath the Antarctic ice, the theory persists, bolstered by vague references in military archives and eyewitness accounts from sailors and soldiers who served during post-war missions in the region. Adding to the intrigue are the major research stations that now dot the continent: McMurdo, Amundsen Scott, Vostok, and others, all managed by powerful nations with military capabilities. Though officially presented as hubs for climate science and geology, some critics have noted the overlap between scientific personnel and military liaisons. While the Antarctic Treaty forbids weaponization or military activity, enforcement relies on trust and voluntary compliance, and observers have little way of verifying whether secret projects are being conducted underground or behind closed doors. In the 1980s and 1990s, as Cold War tensions evolved into global technological races, several reports emerged of unusual sightings near the poles: glowing orbs, high-speed aerial objects, and electromagnetic anomalies. These stories were often attributed to pilot testimony, satellite footage, or intercepted communications, though most remained unverified. Still, they fueled the belief that Antarctica may serve as a testing ground for experimental aircraft or energy systems, projects kept deliberately out of public sight beneath layers of geopolitical cooperation and selective media reporting. As international interest in Antarctica intensified, so too did the sense that the continent's vast, inhospitable terrain had become more than just a frontier of nature. For those who study its history and the people drawn to it, from military commanders to political elites and scientific vanguards, Antarctica is increasingly viewed not as a frozen wasteland, but as a strategic zone of knowledge, secrecy, and potential power. The foundation of the Antarctica no-fly zone conspiracy rests heavily on a collection of specific claims and pieces of evidence that have emerged over the decades, some verifiable, others elusive. Among the most cited are reports of airspace restrictions placed on large swaths of the continent, particularly near the geographic South Pole and certain interior regions. While it is true that there are no formal, universally enforced no-fly zones over Antarctica, various flight path maps and navigation charts show distinct gaps where civilian airliners do not pass. Official aviation guidelines refer to extreme weather conditions, magnetic anomalies, and a lack of nearby emergency landing locations as justifications for these absences. But conspiracy theorists argue that the issue is not one of safety, but secrecy. Central to the debate is the South Pole region itself, where the Amundsen-Scott South Pole Station sits on what some claim to be a gateway to something far beneath the ice. Satellite images of the area, while publicly available in limited resolution, often show strange inconsistencies, pixelated sections, blurred zones, and visual artifacts that seem to obscure rather than reveal. Proponents of the theory point to these anomalies as deliberate obfuscations, suggesting that advanced structures or subterranean complexes have been digitally removed from satellite imagery to prevent civilian discovery. Another cornerstone of the theory involves electromagnetic disturbances. Pilots and navigators have occasionally reported compass malfunctions and disrupted instruments near specific coordinates in Antarctica. Though mainstream science attributes these issues to natural variations in the magnetic field near the South Magnetic Pole, some researchers suggest that the disturbances are localized and artificially generated, possibly by buried energy sources, exotic materials, or advanced technology hidden beneath the ice sheet. These anomalies have also been linked to unconfirmed sightings of unidentified flying objects in the polar skies, as well as the now infamous hole in the ice images circulated online. Those images, allegedly sourced from NASA and independent satellite photography, appear to show a massive circular depression in the Antarctic ice shelf. While most of these photos have been debunked as either misinterpretations or outright fabrications, their persistence in online forums and alternative media has created a mythology of its own. The idea of a vast opening leading into a hidden subterranean realm, possibly one containing an ancient civilization, lost technology, or even extraterrestrial presence. Contributing to the belief in restricted airspace is the existence of so-called exclusion zones, established for scientific or environmental reasons. For example, protected research areas, such as around Lake Vostok, a subglacial lake buried under miles of ice, are subject to intense regulation. Only specific research teams are allowed access, and their movements are tightly monitored. Critics question why a simple scientific operation would require such high levels of confidentiality and logistical oversight. They point out that even scientists operating in these regions are sometimes forbidden from publishing full details of their findings until approved by national committees. One particularly striking claim involves seismic anomalies detected by researchers during drilling operations. In some cases, instruments recorded unusual subterranean tremors that did not match known geological activity. A handful of whistleblower accounts, some anonymously posted online, others supposedly leaked from defense contractors, suggest that the tremors were caused by the movement of enormous underground machinery or artificial structures long buried under the ice. These claims remain unproven, but they echo reports from early 2000s researchers who described hearing low-frequency sounds emanating from deep within the ice, sounds which could not be easily explained by wind or glacial shifting. Though official explanations continue to center around logistical, environmental, and scientific reasons for restricted access and flight routing, the persistence of these alleged anomalies, along with unconfirmed photographic evidence and mysterious disruptions in electromagnetic readings, has formed a mosaic of suspicion. This fragmented but growing body of claims continues to inspire speculation that the ice of Antarctica hides more than just rock and snow, that it conceals something intentionally kept from public view. Scrutinizing the claims surrounding Antarctica's no-fly zones requires separating verifiable data from interpretive speculation. One of the most frequently cited elements in support of the theory is the pattern of international flight paths that avoid direct traversal over the continent. Global aviation records show that most commercial airlines do not chart courses over Antarctica, even when such routes might provide a more direct path, particularly between southern regions like Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and South America. The standard explanation attributes this to safety concerns. Extreme cold temperatures, unpredictable weather, lack of suitable emergency landing sites, and limited ground-based navigation support make polar overflights risky and costly. The International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, has set guidelines that discourage polar overflight for aircraft that cannot meet stringent performance and emergency protocols. Polar operations demand advanced fuel systems, onboard de-icing capabilities, and special certification for pilots and aircraft. Airlines often opt for longer but safer and more efficient routes around the continent. However, these rational explanations have done little to silence questions, especially given that military aircraft, scientific missions, and government-authorized flights are frequently granted access to areas otherwise considered unreachable. To examine the claims of electromagnetic anomalies, researchers have reviewed geomagnetic data collected from ground stations and satellites across Antarctica. It is a well-established fact that the Earth's magnetic field behaves unpredictably near the poles. Fluctuations in magnetic declination, combined with phenomena like auroras and ionospheric irregularities, can disrupt compass readings, GPS accuracy, and radio communications. These natural processes are thoroughly documented in geophysics. Nonetheless, the specificity of certain reported disturbances has raised eyebrows. Several testimonies, most anonymous, suggest precise zones of persistent interference, notably near coordinates not publicly associated with known research stations. In 2001, a group of geophysicists working on ice-penetrating radar experiments in East Antarctica reported unexplained disruptions in their equipment when scanning regions around the Gamburtsev Mountains, a subglacial range buried deep beneath the ice. While the team attributed the anomalies to reflective ice layers and unknown geological features, alternative theorists interpreted the data as possible evidence of concealed structures. Some cited the strange hexagonal patterns visible in certain radar cross-sections as signs of artificial construction, although most geologists maintain that ice and rock formations can naturally produce geometric features when subjected to extreme pressure and thermal variations. The controversial hole in the ice photographs that circulated widely online in the mid-2000s were traced to images manipulated using software, confirmed by independent digital analysts. Still, their viral spread contributed to an online ecosystem that continually references them as potential proof. No credible scientific source has confirmed the existence of a vast entry point or depression at the South Pole. However, the belief endures in part because of documented visual censorship in satellite imagery, not unique to Antarctica, but certainly more prevalent there. Google Earth, NASA Worldview, and other satellite visualization platforms sometimes show lower resolution or stitching errors over parts of Antarctica, which conspiracy proponents interpret as intentional masking rather than technical limitations. Regarding Lake Vostok, the scientific evidence is both intriguing and ambiguous. This massive freshwater lake lies beneath over 2 miles of ice and has been sealed off from the surface for millions of years. In 2012, Russian scientists successfully drilled into the lake, collecting samples and analyzing the unique microbial life found there. Some researchers reported preliminary data suggesting the presence of heat signatures inconsistent with geothermal activity alone. The scientific explanation leans towards subglacial hydrothermal vents, but others speculate on the presence of energy sources or technology unknown to modern science. The extreme secrecy surrounding the full results of these samples, coupled with selective release of data, has only deepened suspicions. Each piece of evidence, whether flight path avoidance, radar anomalies, satellite blurs, or restricted research zones, has plausible explanations. But to conspiracy theorists, It is the cumulative pattern of obfuscation, rather than any single smoking gun, that forms the heart of the mystery. The absence of transparency, they argue, is not the product of routine bureaucracy, but a shield protecting something far more significant than climate research or ancient ice. While the claims surrounding Antarctica's no-fly zones have gained traction among conspiracy theorists, the counterarguments offered by scientists, aviation experts, and historians are substantial and rooted in decades of documented research. Skeptics argue that much of the mystique surrounding Antarctica is the result of misunderstanding, misinterpretation, and a lack of first-hand experience. They point out that the vast majority of speculation comes not from those who have actually worked on the continent, but from outside observers piecing together incomplete data and anomalies that often have mundane explanations. One of the most common misconceptions involves the idea that there are strictly enforced no-fly zones over Antarctica. Aviation authorities clarify that there are no formal no-fly zones in the sense of military airspace restrictions. Instead, there are logistical guidelines and limitations placed on certain aircraft due to safety concerns. The continent's harsh and unpredictable weather, combined with the limited infrastructure for emergency landings or rescue operations, makes overflights risky for commercial carriers. Modern jets flying at high altitudes require strict fail-safes to operate in polar conditions, and most airlines simply choose to avoid the added risk and cost. The imagery anomalies seen on platforms like Google Earth are often cited as evidence of cover-ups. However, digital imaging experts explain that these inconsistencies typically result from technical limitations, such as image stitching, cloud cover, or seasonal changes in lighting and ice patterns. Antarctica's constantly shifting ice sheet complicates satellite imaging, leading to visual gaps or artifacts. These are not unique to Antarctica. Similar inconsistencies appear in satellite images of mountainous or remote regions worldwide. Reports of electromagnetic interference and compass malfunctions are also addressed by geophysicists. Near the magnetic South Pole, the Earth's magnetic field becomes increasingly unstable. The convergence of magnetic lines, combined with auroral activity and ionospheric disturbances, can cause deviations in navigation instruments. This is a well-documented scientific phenomenon observed in both polar regions. Pilots operating in these areas are trained to rely on gyrocompasses and GPS-based systems, which are calibrated to account for such variations. The rumors surrounding Operation High Jump and Admiral Byrd's post-expedition statements are frequently cited as supporting evidence for Antarctica-related conspiracies. Yet military historians argue that these interpretations are often taken out of context. Operation High Jump, though large in scale, was a Cold War-era training mission designed to test equipment and personnel in extreme conditions. The early end of the mission was attributed to weather difficulties, logistical strain, and mechanical failures, not hostile encounters. Byrd's statements about enemy aircraft coming from the poles were likely speculative reflections on the importance of securing all strategic regions, including the polar routes, during a time of global uncertainty. Skeptics also dismiss the notion of hidden Nazi bases or ancient alien technology beneath the ice. They emphasize the lack of credible physical evidence or consistent first-hand accounts to support such claims. Many of the narratives are based on extrapolations from incomplete documents, urban legends, or misidentified natural structures. The alleged whistleblower testimonies are often anonymous, unverifiable, or sourced from fringe websites without peer-reviewed support. When it comes to scientific secrecy, researchers explain that sensitive data, particularly from ongoing experiments like those at Lake Vostok, is often withheld temporarily to ensure accuracy and peer review. These delays are common in scientific publishing, and not necessarily indicative of suppression or concealment. The notion that findings from such research are deliberately hidden to protect a larger secret is, to them, more a product of distrust than of fact. Critics of the conspiracy narrative argue that the continent's isolation, combined with a natural human tendency to project mystery onto the unknown, has created fertile ground for speculation. They caution that while questions should be allowed and transparency encouraged, sensational theories unsupported by evidence can detract from legitimate scientific inquiry and environmental stewardship. To them, Antarctica is not a vault of secrets, but a delicate, remote ecosystem that demands protection and respect, not suspicion and fear. The theories surrounding Antarctica's restricted access extend beyond mere curiosity. They touch on deep societal themes of control, secrecy, and power. At their core, these beliefs reflect a growing mistrust in governmental and institutional authority, especially in an age where access to information is simultaneously widespread and tightly managed. The persistence of the Antarctica conspiracy narrative offers a lens through which to examine how humans process the unknown and what it reveals about collective psychology in the face of global uncertainty. At a time when satellite imagery is readily available and global travel is more accessible than ever, the idea that one part of the Earth remains largely off-limits carries symbolic weight. Antarctica becomes more than just a geographic anomaly. It becomes a symbol of what is hidden, withheld, or suppressed. To many who subscribe to the conspiracy, the locked nature of the continent represents a larger pattern, that truth is carefully curated, that the public is given only partial narratives, and that beneath the surface of every official story lies another, far more unsettling reality. This perception is reinforced by historical examples of real secrecy. Government programs like MKUltra, Operation Paperclip, and the NSA's surveillance activities were once dismissed as conspiratorial nonsense until they were proven true. These revelations have left a lasting impact, eroding public confidence and making it easier for people to accept the possibility that Antarctica, too, might be the site of classified knowledge kept hidden for reasons unknown. The logic becomes simple. If the government has lied before, why not here? The psychological allure of hidden worlds also plays a role. Myths of lost civilizations, subterranean empires, and forbidden zones have been part of human culture for millennia. From Plato's Atlantis to medieval stories of Agartha or Shambhala, the belief in worlds below our own speaks to a longing for discovery, and perhaps a hope that a deeper truth exists beneath the version of reality we are shown. Antarctica, with its vast white emptiness and barely accessible terrain, serves as the perfect canvas for these long-standing archetypes to resurface in modern form. Politically, the theory taps into tensions between nationalism and globalism. The Antarctic Treaty system is administered by a consortium of powerful nations, many of which also serve as dominant forces in world affairs. For some, this is further evidence that a small group of elites decides what the world can and cannot see. The idea that countries with competing interests, like the US, Russia, and China, could all agree to cooperate peacefully in Antarctica while locked in economic or military rivalry elsewhere only deepens suspicion. To those who believe in the theory, such unity is unlikely unless there is something at stake too sensitive to reveal. Moreover, the theory is often linked with broader ideas about hidden technologies, breakaway civilizations, and post-human agendas. Antarctica is seen as a potential launchpad for advanced energy sources, secret experiments, or even portals to other dimensions, claims that blend science fiction with ancient myth. These ideas reflect cultural fascination with the boundaries of science and the fear that groundbreaking discoveries are kept out of reach to preserve the status quo or shield humanity from truths it isn't ready to handle. The internet, especially platforms like YouTube, Reddit, and alternative news sites, has played a critical role in amplifying the mystery. Visual anomalies, obscure documents, and speculative theories circulate rapidly in echo chambers, reinforcing belief and discouraging skepticism. Unlike traditional media, which filters information through editorial standards, these spaces allow unverified content to thrive. Over time, repeated exposure to sensational material can shift what people accept as possible, especially when it's presented with polished production and pseudoscientific language. What emerges is more than a theory. It becomes a worldview. In that worldview, Antarctica is not just a frozen continent. It is a metaphor for the hidden aspects of existence, the truths buried beneath official narratives, and the belief that the most important answers are always kept just out of reach. For those who adopt this perspective, questioning Antarctica is not just about maps and flight paths. It's a rebellion against curated reality, an act of intellectual defiance against a world they suspect is not what it seems. The influence of the Antarctica conspiracy has reached far beyond online forums and fringe discussions. It has seeped into mainstream culture, media narratives, and public imagination in subtle but significant ways. Documentaries, speculative fiction, video games, and blockbuster films have increasingly incorporated elements of the theory, often portraying the frozen continent as a place of ancient secrets, covert operations, or alien contact. These portrayals not only reflect the existing curiosity, but actively shape it, reinforcing the notion that Antarctica is a place where normal rules do not apply. Hollywood, in particular, has long had a fascination with Antarctica. Films like The Thing, 1982, Alien vs. Predator, 2004, and The X-Files, Fight the Future, 1998, all use the continent as a backdrop for stories involving hidden life forms, secret experiments, and powerful relics buried beneath the ice. While fictional, these stories are powerful carriers of suggestion. They exploit the isolation and extremity of the environment to create narratives of hidden danger and forbidden knowledge. For many viewers, the line between entertainment and possibility becomes increasingly blurred, especially when these stories are set in a place they can't verify for themselves. Documentaries and television specials have also contributed to the mythology. Cable channels like History, Discovery, and even National Geographic have aired speculative programming exploring topics like Nazi bases in Antarctica, underground pyramids, and UFO sightings. While often presented as investigative, these shows walk a fine line between fact and fiction, blending legitimate scientific footage with commentary from fringe researchers or theorists. The result is a hybrid form of storytelling that leaves room for interpretation, feeding curiosity without directly confirming or denying conspiracy claims. Social media has accelerated the spread of these ideas, turning short-form content into viral phenomena. TikTok videos showing alleged satellite imagery glitches, YouTube channels dissecting Google Earth anomalies, and Reddit threads breaking down classified documents all contribute to an environment where speculation is the norm. Algorithms favor emotionally engaging content, especially that which sparks mystery, fear, or wonder. So theories about restricted Antarctic zones often receive far more attention than dry explanations rooted in science or policy. The very structure of modern media ensures that the most fantastical version of events spreads the fastest. Meanwhile, news coverage of scientific research in Antarctica rarely captures public attention unless it's framed through a sensational lens. Announcements about drilling into Lake Vostok or studying ancient ice cores might make headlines briefly, but they rarely resonate outside scientific circles. However, when these stories are repackaged by alternative media outlets with dramatic headlines, scientists discover secret energy source beneath the ice. Or, Antarctica melting reveals ancient structures. They are suddenly transformed into fuel for conspiracy discourse. Public distrust in media institutions also plays a role. Many who believe in the Antarctica theory see mainstream news outlets as complicit in narrative control. They argue that the real questions are being ignored or actively suppressed, and that the media's focus on climate change or wildlife conservation in Antarctica is a distraction from something more significant. This belief is reinforced every time a story breaks about media censorship, government secrecy, or scientific misconduct, even when unrelated to Antarctica. Education systems, too, have been drawn into the discussion. Critics of official Antarctic narratives argue that school curricula rarely address the geopolitical dynamics of the continent or the unusual nature of the Antarctic Treaty system. In their view, this omission is not accidental. It's part of a broader effort to prevent the public from asking deeper questions. They point to the way textbooks emphasize exploration and environmental science while skipping over the decades of military involvement and territorial contention that shaped the modern governance of the region. Ultimately, the Antarctica no-fly zone theory has become more than just a claim about restricted airspace. It is a vessel for deeper cultural anxieties about who controls knowledge, who gets access to truth, and what lies behind the curtain of official narratives. As long as the continent remains remote and tightly regulated, and as long as information remains filtered through institutional gatekeepers, Antarctica will continue to loom large in the cultural imagination, not just as a land of ice, but as a symbol of the unknown. As the core narrative around Antarctica's secrecy continues to evolve, more speculative and fringe theories have emerged. Ideas that push beyond government cover-ups and restricted zones into the realm of the extraordinary. These perspectives, while lacking mainstream support or empirical evidence, reflect a growing appetite for answers that conventional explanations do not seem to satisfy. For some, the truth isn't just hidden beneath the ice, it's something entirely alien to human understanding. One of the most persistent fringe theories is that Antarctica conceals an ancient advanced civilization, one that predates all known human history. According to this view, Antarctica was once a temperate inhabited land that experienced a rapid, unnatural shift into its current frozen state. Proponents often cite the controversial Piri Reis map, a 16th century Turkish chart that appears to depict the coastline of Antarctica free of ice, centuries before it was officially discovered. While scholars argue the map more likely illustrates South America or a distorted southern landmass based on incomplete data, believers insist it's a relic of lost cartographic knowledge passed down from a forgotten epoch. Building on this idea is the theory that the lost continent of Atlantis may actually lie beneath the Antarctic ice. Some interpret Plato's descriptions not as allegory, but as literal geographic references misinterpreted over millennia. They suggest that a cataclysmic pole shift, a sudden movement of the Earth's crust, could have displaced Atlantis to the southernmost part of the globe, where it was rapidly buried in ice. Geological evidence of fossilized tropical vegetation found deep under the Antarctic ice sheet is cited as partial support, though scientists attribute this to the continent's drift over millions of years due to plate tectonics. Other theories take a decidedly non-terrestrial turn. Numerous online communities claim that Antarctica is a site of extraterrestrial interest, if not an outright alien base. Theorists point to alleged whistleblower testimonies from former military and intelligence personnel who claim to have seen or been briefed on alien technology hidden under the ice. These claims often involve tales of crashed craft, ancient star maps, or active contact sites concealed from the public. Some even go so far as to suggest that Antarctica serves as a neutral meeting ground between human authorities and non-human intelligences, a kind of interstellar diplomatic zone off limits to ordinary people. Related to these ideas is the concept of a hollow Earth with entrances at the poles, particularly in Antarctica. This theory proposes that the planet is not solid, but instead houses a vast internal world accessible through openings at both ends of the globe. The alleged entrance at the South Pole is believed to be heavily guarded and obscured through technological means, explaining the limitations on both aerial and ground access. Theorists tie this back to ancient myths from Tibetan, Norse, and Native American cultures, which speak of subterranean realms inhabited by beings of great wisdom, or great danger. Religious interpretations have also taken hold, with some claiming that Antarctica holds the resting place of biblical artifacts or fallen angels referenced in apocryphal texts like the Book of Enoch. These narratives suggest that divine or forbidden knowledge was entombed in the ice as a form of cosmic punishment or protection. The extreme isolation and inaccessibility of the region lend themselves to such myth-making, positioning Antarctica as the final frontier in a spiritual as well as physical sense. Fringe theories often cross-pollinate, blending elements of ancient history, extraterrestrial contact, secret technology, and metaphysical belief into elaborate worldviews. Though these ideas lack the rigorous documentation required by mainstream science or journalism, their persistence speaks to a deeper human desire to believe that beneath the cold silence of the ice lies a truth so profound it would upend our understanding of history, reality, and existence itself. In the end, these fringe perspectives are not just about Antarctica. They are about us, about what we long to find in the shadows of the known world, and about the lengths we will go to connect the dots, even when those dots remain out of reach. The conspiracy surrounding Antarctica's no-fly zones and alleged secrets buried beneath the ice is not simply about geography, aviation, or ancient maps. It's a story that taps into something far deeper, a shared suspicion that the world is far more complex, more hidden, and more controlled than we are led to believe. Whether focused on restricted airspace, buried civilizations, alien technologies, or geopolitical collusion, these theories thrive in the empty spaces between official narratives and observable reality. In that vacuum, imagination rushes in, weaving speculation into stories that resonate with people who feel increasingly alienated from institutional truth. Antarctica's extreme remoteness plays a powerful role in shaping that perception. It is one of the few places on Earth most people will never visit, never see firsthand, and never experience beyond filtered images and secondhand reports. That isolation, combined with its inhospitable climate and tightly controlled access, makes it a natural focal point for those who suspect that what we're told isn't the whole picture. Even the mechanisms designed to protect the continent, scientific regulation, environmental treaties, safety protocols, can, in the eyes of skeptics, begin to resemble the architecture of a cover-up. And yet, despite the mystery and mythology surrounding the continent, no single piece of indisputable evidence has emerged to confirm the most extreme claims. There are no verified images of entrances to underground cities, no authenticated documents detailing alien contact at the South Pole, no confirmed accounts of ancient machinery humming beneath the ice. The theories remain, for now, rooted in circumstantial patterns, ambiguous anomalies, and a persistent sense of exclusion from what is perceived as forbidden knowledge. Still, the questions continue. Why do the world's most powerful nations cooperate so seamlessly in Antarctica when they compete so fiercely elsewhere? Why are their zones so rigidly off limits? And why is public access, both physically and informationally, so limited in an age of open data and global transparency? Even if the answer is as simple as safety, science, and environmental stewardship, the structure of control surrounding the continent encourages deeper inquiry. For many, it is not necessarily what is being hidden, but the possibility that something could be hidden that keeps the theory alive. Antarctica functions as a mirror. It reflects not only the icy terrain of our planet's southernmost frontier, but also the contours of our own cultural psyche, our fears, hopes, doubts, and unshakable curiosity. In it, we see both the promise of untouched discovery and the unease of controlled narratives. Whether one believes the continent conceals ancient temples, alien strongholds, secret technologies, or nothing at all, its enduring role in the conspiracy landscape is undeniable. It offers a blank canvas upon which we project the mysteries we're still not ready or not allowed to solve. In the end, the Antarctica no-fly zone conspiracy may say less about the ice-covered continent itself and more about the growing disconnect between institutional authority and public trust. It is a symptom of a world where questions often outnumber answers, where official explanations no longer satisfy, and where the margins of the map, literal and metaphorical, continue to beckon. Antarctica may remain frozen, but the ideas it inspires are very much alive. Thanks for listening. This has been Conspiracy Files. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you'd like to support the show, subscribe to the Forbidden Knowledge Network on Patreon. Subscribe now.